What are maybe some things about dopamine that most people don't know, and probably that I don't know either?
So dopamine is a neurotransmitter, and neurotransmitters are those molecules that bridge the gap between two neurons. So they essentially allow one neuron, the presynaptic neuron, to communicate with the postsynaptic neuron. Dopamine is intimately associated with the experience of reward, but also with movement, which I think is really interesting because movement and reward are linked, right? If you think about, early humans, you had to move in order to go seek out the water or the meat or whatever it was. And even in the most primitive organisms, dopamine is released when food is sensed in the environment. For example, C. elegans, a very primitive worm. So dopamine is this really powerful, important molecule in the brain that helps us experience pleasure. It's not the only neurotransmitter involved in pleasure, but it's a really, really important one. And if you want to think about something that most people don't know about dopamine, which I think is really interesting, is that we are always releasing dopamine at a kind of tonic baseline rate. And it's really the deviation from that baseline rather than like hits of dopamine in a vacuum that make a difference. So when we experience pleasure, our dopamine release goes above baseline. And likewise, dopamine can go below that tonic baseline. And then we experience a kind of pain.
There should be a book that's just about dopamine, and thankfully there is. Dr. Anna Lembke is the one you heard explaining what dopamine is on the previous video. She's a psychiatrist and also a teacher at Stanford, and she wrote a great book called Dopamine Nation. I highly recommend reading it or listening to it via audio because there's so much good information on what dopamine actually is and how it can affect our lives, both in a positive and negative way. One of the really interesting things that I've learned from Dr. Lembke and others about dopamine is this. Performing a tough workout in the morning before you go to work or before you go to school can actually result in your body releasing more dopamine into your system at a steady rate to help compensate for the pain you just put yourself through. These are the types of dopamine increases we want on a consistent basis, rather than getting huge spikes of dopamine without doing any work. Because getting that dopamine increase after doing something that's tough is teaching your brain and body that that's what it takes to have that elevated feeling. This is what can motivate us to do challenging things in life. And the opposite of that would be doing minimal effort and getting a huge reward. And that type of scenario is very, very prevalent in today's world. There are so many opportunities for us to be rewarded with minimal effort. Eating fast food, getting likes or liking things on social media, shopping on your phone, watching just about anything you can think of on your TV on demand, playing video games. All of these things can be highly rewarding with minimal effort. But I'm not saying you should completely cut them out from your life. You just need to be aware of how easily addictive these things can be, and how in today's world you may have to make things a little tougher for yourself in order to sustain a healthy reward system. Cooking healthy food, working out, not staying up all night and going to bed a little early. These things can definitely be tough to do because of how our environment is set up. We currently live in a dopamine nation. So many companies and so many people are trying to get your attention and make you feel good in that moment to give yourself a big dopamine rush. So just remember that sometimes the tough things you do in life are helping you keep a healthy reward system. Get after it.